The question is, though, considering this is the first time we've been recording for literally a month, and we're talking about Dead Man's Chest, which has a giant, angry, hungry cephalopod. What are you drinking?
A cup of coffee.
Why is it that every single time we do this, I'm always the one that's like...
I know.
Upholding the rights. Like, I deliberately didn't touch the Kraken Spice rum until recently, knowing I was going to use it for this. It's the coffee roast version, actually.
I literally was thinking, oh yeah, I'll have some rum, because I got gifted like this 18-year-old rum off my neighbour. So I was like, oh, that'll do. And then I kind of just forgot about it, so I'm just sat there with a bitter coffee.
A bitter coffee. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of The Real Podcasters, the show where, as ever, we're talking all things movies, TV shows, video games, and a bunch of other things in no particular order. My name's Regan, as ever, and I'm joined once again by my extremely likeable co-host who's playing with his hair. It's Dan.
Sorry, it was really irritating my scalp.
I know it's starting to irritate me as well.
But the Mohican's been up for a couple of days, so it's all just kind of a fluffy mess now.
Loft, yeah.
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
Hello. Yes, it has been a couple of minutes since the last time we spoke on this. It
hasn't been a couple of minutes, you absolute liar. Well, tell the truth.
Yeah, okay, it's been about a month, okay? It's the summer holidays. I'm knackered.
Has it really been a month? It's feeling like it's been 3?
Well, I think it was like the 1st of August when the last episode went out, I think. So it was technically end of July. I believe it's the end of August. I could be wrong, I'm not going to lie. My concept of dates is just completely screwed up now. But...
I mean... it could be any all. It could be either all.
Well, exactly. But no, we are back. We've had a little bit of a refresh on the social media channels. Got an updated logo, and as you've heard from the beginning, we've got updated music, courtesy of Dan and his guitar, which I really appreciate. It's really cool. Look at him just sighing.
It's not a guitar. It's a bass guitar.
Oh, I do apologise.
Yeah, you've got to give the credit the fact that it's a bass guitar, which makes it even more impressive.
Right, fine. I'll put it in the credits as a bass guitar. Is that better for you,
Thanks.
Dan?
Yeah, because it just makes it sound like I'm a stereotypical guitarist when I'm not.
Stereotypical as if. But yes, it has been a little while, but we are back pretty regularly now.
We're all refreshed.
Yes, it is nice
like
to finally talk
anyway.
again. It's been a little while. We've, as I say, a bit of an update on the logos and everything, new music. We're now using different software. We've gotten rid of Audacity because both of us are quite sick and tired of episodes being canned because of Audacity. It's absolutely their fault.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It literally is so, like, you know, you could throw the blame at us, but it is literally, we're recording into this software, and then Audacity's like, you know what? It would be a shame if I just bumped up the levels so half the audio is just extremely distorted.
Yeah, it'll be the first time I've actually properly recorded anything on this software beyond like random samples to see if it works.
I think it's great because you can actually just monitor it a lot better than you can with Audacity.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, even on this, I can see there's like a little square where like you're supposed to keep the levels at, and so far it's doing all right. We'll wait and see what happens in the edits, quite frankly.
Yeah,
but yes,
let's not make any promises so far.
No,
let's
definitely not.
Kind of saving.
But yeah, if this is the sort of podcast you enjoy, of course, we're available on YouTube and Spotify. There's a few other platforms and everything, but we're mostly focusing on that now. It's just a little bit easier. Streamline it just a little bit. And of course, we're available on Instagram, technically Threads, whenever I remember to post on that. We also finally got a Facebook page. So there'll be a link in the description
I
for
don't
that.
know.
Yeah, you know what it is?
The co-host hasn't even liked the Facebook page.
No, you haven't. It's just other people from work, which I really appreciate. So thanks, Ash, Beth, and Ben. I really appreciate that, and myself for liking
You'd
my
think
own
it would be
page.
your co-host to give you the first like, and he's literally just finding out now there's a Facebook page.
I could have sworn I told you. I'm pretty certain.
You probably did, but I have a memory of a goldfish, so...
You do, and I'm sure one of the characters in the film that we're talking about today is half goldfish. But you know, we'll find out in a bit.
Yeah, we'll get to that
Yeah, we will. Motion picture.
fishy character later.
Very fishy character. But yes, social media platforms there, listening platforms also there, all in the description as ever. Now, our last episode was on Halo 3 ODST, a game that overall we quite like, despite some
Yeah, from
misgivings.
what I can remember, I think we were a little bit more positive on it compared to Halo 2.
Yeah, just a little bit. And then a couple of weeks
Little bit more
prior, we spoke about Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl for its 20th anniversary. And then I thought to myself, you know
It's still
what?
mad to think that's 20.
Yeah, it's a bit crazy.
We're getting old.
We are getting very, very old. But of course, if we're going to talk about the first film, we need to talk about the other two. And I'm saying the other two because there is two more. No, we're not doing that.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely another... I think maybe one or two after that, but yeah, I think it's just in everybody's best interest if we just pretend that they don't exist.
Yeah, I watched the first 25 minutes of On Stranger Tides for the first time in about 5 years. I'm like, wow, this looks grey. Really grey. It looks boring.
Grey.
But no, instead, we're talking about 2006's Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest. Once again directed by Gore Verbinski, starring Johnny Depp, Orlando Bloom, Keira Knightley, and featuring the first appearance of one Bill Nighy as one David Jones. It's not actually David Jones, it's Davy Jones. Squid monster, Squidward, angry Squidward. Squidward. I'm picturing that. There must have been a crossover at some point. There must have been.
There probably is.
Dan is just lost for words. Like, why are we referencing SpongeBob already? We should not be doing that.
This is just to a stage of becoming exceptionally normal on this podcast where we just go on a tangent over the littlest of thing. In this case, SpongeBob.
It's fine. But for those who haven't seen Dead Man's Chest, I mean, first of all, we're going into spoilers, obviously. That's just what we do here.
And second of all, you have been clearly living in the depths of Davy Jones' locker if you have not seen that film.
Yes, exactly. It made $1 billion. We are part of the $1 billion. It's just... I mean, first of all, I forgot it made $1 billion, actually.
I'm not surprised it did.
No, I'm not surprised either. But in terms of just a brief kind of synopsis, Dan, what are we dealing with this time? Is it pirates again?
Well, no, actually, we're dealing with... we are dealing with pirates. I mean, Clue is kind of in the name, isn't it? Could be like one of those absolutely misleading ones. No, and this time we are dealing with more mythology, I think, in terms of the cruel sea and a very, very, very angry beast that dwells within the deep, dark sea, and a very, very fishy crew, we'll say. And no, that isn't a very innuendo metaphor. That is generally because it's true.
They are
They're very fishy.
most fishy.
But yeah, basically, Sparrow, being Sparrow, decides, you know what, I'm constantly insatiable for my quest for treasure, so why not steal a key from a very, very angry, barnacle-ridden, lobster-legged, octopus-faced dude.
See, that sounds like we're just insulting him. That is literally what he is.
Yeah, I'm
It's
literally
weird,
perfectly
that.
describing Davy Jones here. But yeah, that's basically a very brief plot without spoiling it.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of when we first saw it, I mean, I know when I mentioned when we first saw the first film, it was the same for me with this one, whereas like it was part of the trilogy, and it was weird because I think I watched this one the least of the three, but I preferred this one over all three, weirdly enough. I mean, I even said that towards the end of the last time we spoke about Pirates of the Caribbean, and I even said I'm a little bit nervous about rewatching this because I haven't watched it for years. Like, I've never logged it on Letterboxd since I started the profile in 2019, I think it was. And I just remember really enjoying it. In retrospect, I like it a bit less than I used to. I don't know where I stand on if it's my favourite of the three, because there's definitely bits that it does better than the first film, but I think overall the first is more consistent. But yeah, I mean, overall it's a bit weaker than it used to be, but I still quite enjoy this film. I don't know if I think it's great, but judging by the faces you've been pulling and how cryptic you've been on Messenger about this, I'm guessing you're a bit. I think you're a lot more mixed on it.
Am I though, or have I just been exaggerating?
We usually do that here, like every single week.
We usually do that.
We usually do.
This is common on this podcast.
It is.
Okay, so rewatching it. Still, well, I suppose I should give history of my first time watching if we're doing that. You know what it is? I didn't actually watch it till years after its release.
Okay.
So, like, I've always sort of stuck with Curse of the Black Pearl, and then I got hold of the trilogy. I'm like, you know what it is? I haven't seen any of these other films, because I think I started watching them a bit more when Stranger Tides was just about to come out.
Right.
So, just started watching the trilogy back to back, and it's difficult to kind of say which one I watched the most and which one I watched the least, because I kind of just watched all three in a day. Like, I didn't just choose one film. I would just like go, okay, well, I'll start from Black Pearl, that one. But over the years, I think I've kind of just sort of pushed World's End to the side, because I definitely think it's the weakest of the trilogy. And then just stuck with Dead Man's Chest and Black Pearl. And I was like, you know what it is? Like, I don't know which one I prefer. So then, for a time being, it generally was Curse of the Black Pearl, because it's a great film.
Yeah.
And then watching this, and surprise, surprise, as a horror fan,
Funny
you know what it
enough.
is? If you changed the tone of this film a bit, you've absolutely got a horror film.
Oh, definitely.
You've absolutely got a horror film. You can't even deny it. Like, anybody who says that it's not a horror film, you'd literally just have to go through a different production company more than likely, because I very much doubt Disney would be willing to make a Pirates of the Caribbean horror film. I doubt it. But nah, I still think it's my favourite after all this time.
Oh, okay.
There's a few little bits, but still I'm kind of in the opinion that this is still my favourite one out of all of them. I just think it's the most fun to watch. I think it's got a good blend of absolutely everything. Like, it's definitely funny. It's got some great action sequences. And as I say, like, you know, if this was just made through a different company, you could have absolutely had another horror film. Like a pirate horror film. I mean, how obscure are pirate horror films anyway? I mean, I couldn't name a single one off the top of my head.
I mean, this one definitely steers closer to horror, but I guess because it does steer closer to the supernatural side of this universe than even the original film, because I mean, that one absolutely did, but it had a good blend of gritty realism and CGI skeletons.
Yeah.
This one is like, we can still have some of that, but let's
I think it's the whole,
let's
like,
do some fishy things.
the pirate mythology, you know, with like the Kraken and stuff like that.
The Kraken.
Definitely steering the Kraken.
Apparently, that is how you're supposed to pronounce it, and I'm like, bollocks to that. I'm calling it the Kraken because that is what I.
No.
Because that is what.
Kraken is what it's meant to be.
Kraken.
Kraken. Nah, it's still maintained to be my favourite one out of just all the films, really. And it's not that Curse of the Black Pearl is a terrible film. It's not.
Oh no, definitely
It's
not.
just that I think this is the more rewatchable one for me personally.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. Despite the fact that I might have rewatched it less of the three, I think my memories of it were a lot stronger than the other ones. Definitely for the original, like I forgot a lot of Curse of the Black Pearl until we rewatched it last month. Well, we did.
Yeah.
I did. Little cheat.
That's, what, because I didn't rewatch it and it's just from memory?
Yeah, to be honest, it'll be the same next month, so it's fine. But one thing I didn't really realise until rewatching it recently was that this is very much the Pirates equivalent of The Empire Strikes Back. It is virtually identical.
I see why you've made that remark. I kind of see why you've made that remark.
Well, I mean, that's the thing to me. I'm not even using it as like a negative because I think it's a smart idea. Because let's face it, Empire Strikes Back is a very different film to Star Wars, and Dead Man's Chest is a very different film to the first one. I mean, even just like from the first few shots, it's very, very different. It's certainly much darker in tone. And I think, you know, we've mentioned this before about when you're doing sequels and stuff, you kind of want the sequel to go in a different direction anyway. So it's interesting when you look at the reviews.
That's just kind of the thing with it, though. Like, it's pointless trying to make a sequel that's just the same as the original film, because you don't want that. You want something completely different, you know, something that literally blows you out of the water.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you read the reviews and people are saying, like, oh, I don't like the fact it steers closer into, like, silly mythology and monsters, I want more of just regular pirate action, I'm like, so just watch the first film then, if that's the case.
Yeah.
Like, if you just keep on doing
like,
this...
the first film delves into the mythology a bit, I mean, like, a curse on gold, I mean, what did you expect?
And you do get a passing reference to Davy Jones and Davy Jones' locker, which is nice that they properly address this here in a very unique way. But I mean, it still has those themes, like especially like with the price of freedom, but now we've got a little bit more of mortality and what freedom actually is, especially through Davy Jones, because he has that freedom that the rest of the pirates want, but not the right kind, really.
I think it's... Yeah, I'd definitely say I'm in total agreement with you, to be honest.
Okay,
kind of just forgot what I was going to say. In truthfulness. But yeah, I think it's like questioning the freedom now, because it's like, well, yeah, we're free, but if we get caught by Davy Jones, are we really free? Mm-hmm. Like, we can't really escape. Kind of got God of the Sea here.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, we'll definitely deal with the freedom side of things a little bit more when we talk about Davy Jones, and especially with Beckett, who, as a character, I appreciate a lot more recently than I used to. I thought he was just a pompous brat. That's kind of the point. But one thing I do actually really like in this, and I mean, this is kind of sort of hinted at in the first film, because all these lead characters are essentially pirates. They're not exactly good people. And there's a lot of moral ambiguity there, especially with Jack Sparrow in this, because he will absolutely just completely rewrite his plan every single time and jeopardize everyone else just for the sake of saving his own skin.
Well, yeah, he jeopardizes everybody else to basically save himself. Mm-hmm. It's like there's two people who are literally threatened with a gallows, but as long as he's fine, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the whole price of freedom thing, this is something that Sparrow is facing a lot in this film, as it's revealed that the Black Pearl solely exists because of a deal he made with Davy Jones prior to the events of the film. He earned his freedom after the last film. This is actually the only film in the entire franchise where we actually properly get Captain Jack Sparrow. It's the only time he's actually captaining the Black Pearl, because it's either someone else's, destroyed, stuck in a bottle, or brought back at the very last minute. I think that's what happens in the last one. I confess, all I can remember is him hanging off an anchor in like a waterfall or something. I don't remember anything else.
Yeah, that's all I remember about that film. A very terrible CGI scene with an anchor.
Yeah. But as I say, with that moral ambiguity, this is the kind of character who will go so far as to recruit 99 new sailors for his ship solely to save himself. And I didn't really think about it much at the time. I just thought it was played for laughs. And then in retrospect, I'm like, this guy's just horrible. But it's weird because it's not like...
It kind of goes back to what you were saying, though, because it is going in an absolutely darker direction, because you don't pick up on something like that first, and then you're like, wow, this guy is just a douche.
Yeah. But
like, he is the most pirate of pirates. He's doing anything he can to basically just save his own skin. Recruit 99 people, half of them get cannibalized. Oh, well, I'm fine.
Yeah. I mean, that entire sequence is pretty funny. I've used a line from that constantly, as we both have, but different lines. It's fine. But yeah, I mean, this isn't exactly a character who's overwhelmingly likable, but you're still kind of on board with it, which is really, really weird. It's very much a character that's not particularly good, but then again, no one is in this film, which I really like. What I also
there's
appreciate,
not like one absolutely heroic character. They all kind of have their
yeah,
bad traits about them, I think.
and the one thing I do appreciate with this film in particular is that this is really the last time that we get Sparrow as a character and not a caricature. Like, it gets a bit too much in the third film, and then it becomes too much of a focal point in the fourth. I'm like, this character should literally be like, not to go back to Empire Strikes Back, but I will. He's essentially the Han Solo of the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. He's the one that just pops up and causes a little bit of chaos, kind of heroic, pretty badass, and then leaves. He's never the focus, and he shouldn't be. So, although in that respect, that means that Will Turner is Luke Skywalker, and he just isn't. Although he is dealing with father stuff.
Yeah, I mean, kind of, but no. Like, I would say it is absolutely Luke Skywalker, but it's not because Orlando Bloom doesn't lose a hand in the last scene, so...
Does anyone lose a hand in this? Well, I mean, they'll lose a head, but it's fine. But...
it's fine.
Yeah. And I also appreciate the fact that the Sparrow doesn't get his happy ending either. Like, he's trying to escape Davy Jones the entire film. He's not going to, especially when we know this is part 1 of 2, because this is back in the time when, you know, after the Lord of the Rings was so successful with back-to-back sequels, they're like, we'll shoot both these films back-to-back. Though it is interesting rewatching At World's End, that film kind of negates a lot of this film, as it turns out.
Yeah.
Which is awkward, because I still really like this one, but we'll get to At World's End next month. We're not doing it yet. And one of the things that we mentioned with the first film is that, you know, Johnny Depp gets top billing. The lead characters are still Will and Elizabeth. In particular, Elizabeth in this one. Because she essentially goes down the same route that Will does in the first film. Because she's obsessed with pirates in the first one. Like, we get that from the very first scene. She's, like, just a little bit obsessed. But has never gone down that route.
Tiny bit.
And now in this film...
It's almost to a point where it consumes her, really.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because with Will, he's very much fighting that, like, pirate side of him because of with his father, who we do meet in this film. Elizabeth is very much the same. She's got that little bit inside her that is full-on pirate. And she's still kind of towing the line right up until the very end, when she's essentially the one to actually kill Jack Sparrow. When no one else has been able to, it's like, nah, it's her that does it. And I kind of love that. I like the fact that she's the one that does it. And there's a nice conclusion to her character arc when Sparrow literally calls her pirate. I was like, yeah. Elizabeth is just awful. She's a horrible, horrible person. So she fits being a pirate.
She's a horrible, terrible person.
Yeah, she is.
Do you know what it is? I think when you look at it in the first film, she comes from a very, like, rich and wealthy family, and then she just goes down the line into piracy.
Yeah,
it's like, wow, what happened?
Yeah, on the one hand, she's the last person to become a pirate, but on the other hand, of course she's the one to do it, because even from the first one, she's like, I don't want this, I don't like this is just not me at all. And she still doesn't really steer towards that until this one, and I really like that. I like that a lot. Granted, from the second act, she's kind of just tossed off and other people come in, like the return of Norrington, who is just a shell of himself, which is kind of funny. But then
I was going to say that's quite funny.
Yeah, being thrown...
Considering, like, when we find him, he's literally crusted in pig excrement, so he has an excrement shell.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, it was pretty funny. And then, of course, we have Will, who, you know, as I mentioned before, he's almost the Luke Skywalker side of things of this, because now he's dealing with the appearance of his father, Boota Bill, played by Stellan Skarsgård, who I really like in this. Like, I think it's
probably I mean, I love him in World's End as well, don't get me wrong. especially like with the realization, because I mean, obviously we'll talk about it when we get to World's End, because I've got some stuff to say on that.
I do as well.
But I do really like it how that he's so, I don't know what the word would be. Well, basically he's just so frightened for his own freedom that he has no choice but to serve the Dutchman.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't want that for Will.
Yeah.
At all.
One thing I do really like, and it's something that, again, there's a lot of things I've picked up on this in later years than I did at the time. I love how quiet Will is in terms of his reaction to the fact that this is his dad. Because he doesn't really have much of a memory of him. He doesn't really have much of a life with him. So seeing him like this, he's quite reserved with us until he just like lashes out at him. He essentially treats him like a stranger because that's who he is to him, essentially.
Well, yeah, because that's what he is.
Yeah.
Because I think the last time he really sees him is when he's a kid on a ship, and then the ship gets blown up, and then he's on his own from there, pretty much.
Yeah, and even then, he's under the impression that he's just like a merchant sailor. He's not a pirate. So for him, this isn't who his dad is. Until further on in the film,
yeah, he's almost in denial of who his dad actually is, and then when he realizes it, he's like, "Oh, Captain Jack was right."
Mm-hmm. And then, of course,
because he's always in the opinion that he was an honest sailor, and then like Sparrow was like, he was a scoundrel.
Yeah,
he was a filthy pirate.
But no, it works for this. I really like that, and of course, we do get to see a lot of the crew for the Flying Dutchman, of course, which brings us to Davy Jones, who is very different compared to Barbossa, despite also having a beard, but this time with tentacles instead of...
his beard is a lot more lively.
Yeah, it's a very lively beard. He's like a nude. Oh. He is actually just like a really,
he really is,
really
to be honest.
angry Scottish ood. I didn't think we'd be referencing that show on here.
No, neither did I, but there it is.
No, happens every now and again.
It's, you know what it is? I love the whole Dutchman thing. I mean, maybe it's just the like mythology and stuff like that, but I love the fact of like the longer you are in service to it, the more you become part of the ship. I just love that whole thing, part of the crew, part of the ship. That's just brilliant.
No, I think it's great, and I think Davy Jones as a villain, I think works really well, because as I say, one of the major themes of the Pirates franchise is pirates represent freedom, and the government, doesn't. That's very political, as it turns out. Davy Jones also has that, but it's the complete mirror opposite.
Yeah, it's like, it's freedom, but at a price.
Yeah, it's like freedom permanently, but there's like a certain caveat that just completely tears it apart. In this case, yeah, you can roam the seas forever. Only allowed on land once every 10 years. Not allowed any more than that.
Yeah.
And this is also a character who was lost a lot. He does all this because of love, and then he loses it entirely, so he tears out his own heart and chucks it in a box.
Very understandable villain, very different from Barbossa. I mean, Barbossa's a great villain, but this, you can see why he's doing these things.
Yeah, I mean, he is also like abusing the role that he has, where he's supposed to ferry people from this life to the next, and because he's just grief-stricken and rageful, he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to mess with people, because he's got such a sick and twisted sense of humour, and I absolutely love it. Like, he's just having
He's like
fun.
the Ghostface of the Seven Seas.
He is literally Ghostface. He is Ghostfish.
Ghostfish.
He's Ghostfish.
Ghostopus.
Ghostopus, there you go.
Ghostopus. Yeah, because the guy's an octopus. Octopus/lobster.
But I mean, obviously, if we're going to talk about Davy Jones, we need to talk about the visuals. And it's actually offensive. This is from 2006, and it looks borderline impeccable compared to 2023. I don't know how that happens.
It does, it's mental.
It
absolutely is. I mean, look at some of the releases we've had. Marvel.
All of them.
And a film from 2006 looks better than half of what Marvel's released over the past year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, they just knew where to put the money, whereas nowadays it's just... yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like, here's a lot of money. do what you please.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, like visually, it's just perfect. Like I've got no issues with it, and it just looks amazing both at night and in the day, which I can't say for a lot of CGI creatures in movies.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Looking at
Usually
you, Godzilla.
when yeah, Godzilla. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Godzilla. Oof. Yeah, watching some of those in the day is just No, but with this, it's absolutely still brilliant looking all these years later, like 2006, and it still looks brilliant. Because you're always kind of worried about stuff like this, especially with childhood films that have CG. You think like they're just going to age terribly with age, and this really hasn't.
No, it hasn't.
I mean, sure, there might be a few bits that look a bit odd, but then again, like it's just one of those things. It's age. You're going to be saying this like in 70 years' time at like one of the best CG films of like whatever decade. I'm going to think, oh wow, that's aged terribly.
Yeah, I mean, even when we spoke about Curse of the Black Pearl, I mean, when I watched it on Disney Plus, like the 4K version looks absolutely spot on. Rewatching At World's End, it looks a little bit more iffy, but it's still like nitpicky, frankly. Like every little, like every few shots looks a bit, CGI somewhat. But this one really doesn't. It looks pretty spot on for like the entire thing, and a lot of it is practical as well.
Say, I think. Yeah, I mean, the practical stuff is brilliant, but even the CG stuff, you could think, you know what it is? That does actually look good enough to be practical in some way, one or another. But I love how practical this film is as well. Like, they don't just rely on making everything CG Marvel.
Which is ironic, given it's the same studio.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I mean, because they shot both this one and the next one back to back, they deliberately built a full-size version of the Black Pearl and of the Flying Dutchman. I mean, there's a fantastic behind-the-scenes feature for At World's End when they're doing stuff on the Maelstrom sequence, and they've got both ships together going around each other. And I'm just like, this is just a level of craft that we just don't have anymore. It's just, we'll just make it CG.
It's so unfortunate that it has come to, you know, well, we can't be bothered to really make big sets anymore, so why not just get a gigantic warehouse-sized green screen room? Mm-hmm. We can just do all that. It's just lazy. There's nothing... I mean, yeah, CGI artists work their arse off, no doubt, but I mean, there's just that level of craft when you're making something practical. You can say, oh yeah, I helped build that, by the way.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. But it's like you say, it's absolutely ridiculous. But it still works so well here. And one thing I do think works a lot better on rewatch, as I mentioned before, is Cutler Beckett as a villain. Because when I first saw this film, as I say, I didn't find him that engaging. He wasn't particularly like over the top or anything.
I'm kind of like you. When the first time I was watching it, I was like, "You're a bit of a pompous arse, like, aren't you?"
Yeah, but then that is kind of the point. He's supposed to be the exact opposite.
Yeah,
because
but then you're like, okay, you're actually quite a good villain, especially with the whole like Sparrow's left his mark and I've left mine kind of thing. I'm like, oh, that's who.
Yeah. But of course he's kind of running the East India Trading Company in this, who is essentially the anti-pirate, basically. This is of course based on an actual company, the East India Company, but not nearly as much as this one is.
Yeah.
And what I find is interesting, I mean, we haven't really spoken about the MacGuffin in this, which is, of course, part of the title, The Dead Man's Chest. I think this is one of the strongest MacGuffins in a film, because you completely understand why everyone is after it. They're all there for different reasons, and they're all clashing with one another. And I really
it's
like
like
that.
You've got three factions. You've got obviously Sparrow and Turner, Liz. And then you've got the Flying Dutchman crew, and then you've got the East Indias. You've got these three factions just clashing over one thing. Mm-hmm. It's brilliant.
Yeah, but I think it works really well. And
because it's literally the goal of whoever has the heart controls the sea, more or less.
Mm-hmm. And you are constantly thinking, okay, who's actually going to get it? And I mean, I know fair enough, it is part 1 of 2, so you're kind of thinking, okay, it's going to end on some sort of cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And you don't expect it's going to be Norrington that gets it. Of all characters to get it, in retrospect, of course it's going to be him. because he's just the one that's off to the side. He's just kind of unassuming. You think, yeah, he's just the bottom of his, just like the bottom of the line.
He's literally at rock bottom. So this is his like one chance to basically just ask for whatever the hell he wants now.
Mm-hmm. But it works really well, and I do really like it. One other thing I do really like, I've always loved it, and as I say, it's named after, of course, the rum, is of course the Kraken, or Kraken, or Crocken, or Squidward.
Nah, it's Croken.
Or Phil. Either or, who knows.
Nah, I always heard it was Kraken. Crocken's how it's meant to be said.
That entire conversation only came about because the guy who plays Gibbs, Kevin McNally, wasn't actually sure how you're supposed to say it. And then Gore Verbinski was like, we can write that in, can't we? Yeah, we can. And he does.
So funny.
And because, yeah, I mean, all of them are technically correct except for Kraken. Just sod that. No one calls it that.
It's so funny. That whole thing is so funny. It's just two guys in a rowboat having an argument about how you pronounce Kraken. Nah, it's Crocken. Crocken's how it's meant to be said. Nah, I always said it was Kraken. Then the dog jumps in. It's like, oh, must have seen a catfish. It's like,
oh.
And then you just get hit by a giant wave. I'm like, that serves you right for making that absolutely horrendous pun.
Yeah. But everything with the Kraken, I think, is just awesome. Like, I love it as a design. I love that you never get a proper look at it. Like, not even...
Yeah, it does the whole alien thing. Like, you're keeping it... You know, you're always mentioning it, but you never show its full scale.
Yeah.
Not until right at the end anyway, but even so, you don't see, like, the full thing. You just see how big it actually is.
I mean, technically, the only time you do is when it attacks the ship that Will's on. And he eventually dives under the water.
Merchant ship, yeah.
And you briefly see it in the distance, and you still don't really get a good look at it. And even though we're talking behind the scenes, it was really difficult to design it because there's no actual, like, proper reference to it. There's no visual aid or whatever.
Oh, no, I was going to say there's going to be, like, absolutely hundreds of, like, different variations of how different people see it. Because, you know, one person might draw it as one thing, some other person might illustrate it as another. It's just one of those things. It's legend, isn't it?
Mm-hmm, exactly. But I still think any sequence with the Kraken, I think, is really, really cool. And eventually,
I think my favourite's got to be the definitely the merchant ship when Will is picked up by the merchant ship, and it just instantly, because when you start hearing the sounds and that, you're like,
oh, the sound design is just perfect in this. I mean, you know, we mentioned about the score in the previous one. I mean, the score here, properly done by Hans Zimmer this time, and the sound design is just spot on. I've got no faults with it at all.
I think the sound design is just absolutely... It's just beast in this one. There's no other way to say it. It is terrific. Like, every little thing is... It just plays an important... Like, the tiniest sound effect has the biggest effect. It's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even just the wood creaking on the ocean or something like that, it's brilliant. Like, they haven't thought... They've just literally put everything in.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, there's a ship on the water. Well, we need to make it sound like there's a ship on the water.
Yeah. I don't know which Kraken sequence is my favourite. I don't know if it's the merchant one or the final one with the Black Pearl. I think that one might steer it just a little bit further, only because Will has the benefit of hindsight. He knows how to almost take down this thing. So there's a little bit more tension when it's just like crawling up the ship, crawling up the cannons, and he's like, no, just wait. And you're like, can you hurry up and blast this thing to Kingdom Come, please?
Yeah, like, I imagine there's, like, some, like, just swabby, like, in the air, just being chucked around the tentacle. Well!
But it's brilliant. And it is probably my favourite action sequence in the film. I mean, talking about, like, favourite moments, as I say, that one, I've always really loved the moments when Jack runs away on the ship. And then he's like, what the hell do I do? And he looks at the compass.
Yeah, because then he looks at the compass and saying, what do I want the most? And then he realises, and it's like, yeah.
I do actually like that as a concept in this one, because we do get context for the first film as well, because he's like, okay, this compass doesn't point north, it just points to the thing you want most in the world, even if you don't realise that's what it's supposed to be. So you never actually see it when he's looking at it towards the end. He's like, Because for all intents and purposes, it could have been facing the other way. He's like,
yeah. I don't know. It's very difficult to pick like favorite scenes in the film because there's a lot of them. There are so many of them, but the Kraken one definitely I think the merchant ship one, but for tension wise, definitely the final one because again, it's just when Will's just like wait for it, and the thing's just getting a grip and a bigger grip, and you're just like, well, we just do something, please. Well, it's like some dude just being chucked around by a tentacle. Well, hurry up.
I still really love the stuff with the Pelagostos tribe as well. That's just brilliant. I mean, it might be a bit iffy now, but I don't care.
It's a little still over the top, but I still think it's very entertaining.
Yeah, and even just like the way that Jack's talking to everyone and he's just like, nom say uniki, snip snip. I love that. It's like a passing reference to the last film. I'm like, that's like the kind of reference I like because no one else can make that reference. It doesn't work for anyone else.
You're not a eunuch, are you? And then it's an ear.
But yeah, I mean the introduction to Davy Jones as well. That one's just perfect.
Yeah, I mean going back to like the tonal shift to more horror based, I think that whole sequence is just terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're on this really like wrecked ship and there's just a crew member who falls and his face is just gone. It's like something sucked his face off, literally.
Yeah.
Because that's what happened. And they get these absolutely like shell-shocked crew members, one of who's like a religious nut, who's basically just praying for anything to save him, and then Jones is pretty much just laughing at him.
Mm-hmm.
Which I really like.
Yeah, I think as well, like the final moments with Jack before he's killed by the Kraken, I think is really cool. Even just him being betrayed by Elizabeth, and he's actually just smiling at her because he's like, yeah, you finally figured out who you actually are. And I kind of like that, even though you killed us. How dare you? But he is just
kind of like that, even though he killed us.
Yeah. And you know, as utterly implausible as it is, I do like the fact that before he dies, the Kraken spits out his hat that he lost at the beginning of the film. I'm like, and that's
it's
just
his little reaction as well. It's just covered in snot, and he just
like, oh,
whips it.
Not so bad, thank you.
Hello, beastie.
But it is a good ending for him, and it's a hell of a cliffhanger as well. Because again, he's not. He's not the lead of the film, but to kill him off, and you're like, okay. And I love the realization.
Admit, it's kind of like the Pelagostos tribe. You know, I mean, it's a little bit over the top, but where Norrington, Sparrow, and Will basically just have an absolute fallout with the old like, I'm assuming it's like a mill of some description.
Yeah,
and it's just absolute chaos.
But again,
because they're all just turning against each other in the name of treasure. It's like,
but I think it's earned the over the top nature. Even something as like I've never thought this was like silly, but like the sequence when Davy Jones is playing on the organ. And he's playing like a really haunting version of like the melody that's on like the little locket.
Yeah.
And he's playing it with his beard. Now, when you say that out loud, that sounds stupid. But it works for this film.
But then you realise that he has like another like however many fingers because he's literally becoming something out of the sea because that's what he's been cursed with.
I have heard people
very fishy crew.
Yeah, I have heard people play that theme on actual organs in churches, and it's awesome. Like it's just, I mean, for one, I'm surprised the people running the church actually allowed you to do that. Quite frankly, but because no offense, if you're walking past the church like on like an evening, and all of a sudden you hear that, you're like, nah, I'm screwed. I'm buggered. Yeah, he's coming.
No, it is. I love it how. When he's playing it, like, there's a lot of anguish on his face that he's still in pain. You can see that.
Yeah.
As well. Like, you get the tear and stuff. I'm like, oh my god, that's brutal. I think it even does it in World's End as well.
Yeah,
I think it does a little bit better in World's End, like.
there's definitely more given to Davy Jones, especially with his history in the third film. Like, because it's not really needed here. This works really well as just like the middle chapter of the three. There's enough there to keep you intrigued until the third film, where we can see just a little bit more. There's still a lot of like mystery with him. Like, we don't ever really know when he became this way. Like, it's said in the third film that he was there for the first Brethren Court to bind Naomi Harris's character, but no one really knows when the first one was, because I think it's only the fourth court that's in Our World's End, which I find is hilarious. Just like, oh yeah, it's just the fourth one. It's fine.
Yeah.
But again, we'll get to
one, not the third one, the fourth.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there is just a lot of moments that I like, and of course,
I think anything with the Dutchman crew and just seeing how morbid and scary they are. I mean, like, some of them you can tell have been in service for so long because of the way they look. I mean, there's a guy in a scene who literally has a goddamn, like, steering wheel in his body.
Yeah, and there's one of them that's just a hammerhead shark.
Yeah.
I love that. And
one is a eel. Like, he has the head of an eel and he basically just swings it around before getting it cut off.
And there's a crab one as well. When, like...
Oh, Hadras. I love Hadras.
Is that actually his name? Has he actually got a name? That's adorable. I didn't realise
Oh,
he had a
they
name.
have names.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that so much, man. Him and his little head.
Follow my voice. No, that's a tree.
Follow my voice. No, that's a tree. Then he just walks off with the chest. It's like... And then he just literally becomes a crab and he just scurries off.
I love it.
It's brilliant.
Now, of course, there is just a few bits of trivia, you know, because there is, you know, a lot in this film. It's just brilliant, you know. As I say, I mean, I'm saying brilliant as if it's a fantastic film. It's got its issues. I think it's a bit too long, for one. And as I say, going into the third film, it does negate quite a bit that's occurred in this one. But a few things I've picked up on, again, courtesy of IMDb. I'm not going through all of them, because we've not got time for that. So you've got the sequence when, just before the Kraken starts attacking the Black Pearl, and Jack Sparrow has got his jar of dirt. And he's just singing about, like, oh, I've got a jar of dirt.
I've got a jar of dirt. And guess what's inside it?
Obviously, completely unscripted, because of course it was.
Well, it was going to be. Like, it was absolutely going to be. Like, I just knew from the moment that was not in the script at all.
Yeah, no, it's... in fact, actually, talking about the Kraken, because I mentioned this before, how there was no real-life reference. So the Kraken was really difficult to animate, as again, with no reference, until animation director Hal T. Hickel instructed the crew to watch a certain film as like a point of reference. Would you like to know which one that was?
Yes, absolutely.
Would you like to take a guess?
Is it a Godzilla film?
It actually is.
Which one?
King Kong versus Godzilla. Because there's a sequence in that with a giant octopus crawling over a load of miniatures and like, use that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, for God's sake. But I just love, like, I mean, that film is... It's a film.
It's a film.
But I just love the fact that that's the one that go with, like, no other film with a giant octopus. No, it's King Kong versus Godzilla from 1962.
No, or you could just, like, go to, like, the local library and just get, like, a book on, like, mythical creatures or something like that, or, like, a book on, you know, mythical sea creatures from whatever year of piracy stories, etc. No, we'll just watch Godzilla, King Kong versus Godzilla from, like, what is it, like, the 60s?
Yeah. So, Gore Verbinski initially wanted Davy Jones to be Dutch, because he's the captain of the Flying Dutchman. So, like, taking a little bit too literally there.
Yeah.
Bill Nye's response is just beautiful. It's like, I don't do Dutch, so I decided on Scottish.
Well, what do you expect from Bill Nye the Science Guy?
Yeah, exactly. The the sequence when Will's trying to find Jack and the crew before we get to the island with the Pelagostas, the last guy he talks about an island where the long pork is very good. Long pork is a euphemism for human meat. It's a shame that Will didn't know that.
Oh my.
Oh my.
Goodness. Lewd.
And the final bit, which I think is pretty cool for the time, but it's funny when you think about it now. This was the fastest film at the time to reach $1 billion at the box office. Took 63 days, though.
63 days? Well,
2
to be
months.
honest, that's absolutely nothing.
I was about to say, I'm thinking like Avengers Endgame. Didn't that take just about a week to make $1 billion? I'm like,
That's nothing,
one
man.
week, 2 months.
Yeah.
That's still pretty good for the time. I mean, it was just over $1 billion. I think it was like $1 billion and like 66 million or something. But that's still really good going. Again, I didn't realize it made $1 billion because At World's End didn't. Actually made less. But again, this is still the time where it's still kind of skewed as to whether a first film or a sequel is going to make more money than the previous.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is something we can say now, for some reason, with everything bombing, which we've already spoken about before, so it's
I was going
fine.
to say, like, it could be a sequel, it could be a prequel, it could be a remake. It's just...
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
Actually, the final bit of trivia I will say. Of course, the other big cliffhanger beyond Jack Sparrow being killed is the return of Barbossa at the very end. When they did the script, they didn't actually have that. They actually had
No.
Zoe Saldana's character from the first film appearing at the end, and that's what the entire cast were told. So when he starts coming down the stairs, and like all the cast just start looking up and, you know, gasping and looking a bit shocked, it's because the actors
It's a
themselves
genuine reaction,
had
yeah.
no idea that was going to happen. And I was like,
See, I love when films do
Yeah.
that. Like, when you're told something and then it's something completely different, you get the most honest reaction ever. It's not fake in any way at all. It's genuine.
yeah.
It's the real deal.
No, I think it's absolutely spot on, and I absolutely love that. I mean, you know, I do like Barbossa as a character, you know, like long after I used to watch these. Less so in the last two films. He's got absolutely bottle to do.
Yeah.
But he's still just a likable character. He's just fun, and it's nice you don't really know
He's
that he's
definitely
gonna.
the fun villain, whereas Davy Jones is like, yeah, I see why you're a villain, kind of thing. But like Barbossa's just like, you're a pirate. Like, you're just doing what every other pirate would do. You're just an arse.
Yeah, basically.
It's like, oh yeah, we're sick of you being captain now, so we're gonna put you on an island and just basically go away.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's our major thoughts on the film. One thing I will ask, though, because, you know, we mentioned this before, like, reviews for this film weren't great. Like, even on Rotten Tomatoes for this film, it's, like, mid-50s in terms of...
Is it really? I thought it would be a bit higher than that.
Well, it's weird, because on IMDb, the average rating is 7.4 out of 10, which that's actually pretty good going, but then Metacritic has, like, 53, which we don't count Metacritic. It's stupid. But the general consensus for this one, maybe a bit less than the third film, is that it just ain't that great, and it's not like the first film.
What?
And I'm sat there thinking, again, that completely misses the point. Like, if you want your sequel to be the same as the previous one, just watch a Transformers film.
Yeah, I was gonna like,
Because every single one is exactly the same.
you see, this is what bothers me with critics is you can't win with them.
No, you can't, Dan. You cannot win with me.
That's why. That's why I never ever pay attention to Rotten Tomatoes critics. I always just look at audience score. That's all you ever need to do when you watch a film and you're curious about what people think of it. Look at audience score. Don't pay attention to critics, because critics really don't know a lot.
No, because
Sorry, man.
like the critic consensus is 53, but the audience score is 72. So that's pretty more than
Exactly.
like, and it's interesting how like the actual consensus quote is "Gone is Depp's unpredictability and much of the humor and originality of the first movie," and I'm like, no, I don't see it. Again, I don't think this film is
I think
brilliant.
it's got a great blend of it. I mean, like it's definitely not as. I don't think there's a lot of comedy and stuff in this film compared to the last one. But then again, it's gone for something totally different. It's a lot darker.
Yeah, I mean, it's not nearly as silly. I mean, yeah, there's some
Like, was it
truly
too
silly
scary
moments.
for the critics?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't like the octopus.
But no, I mean, like the only issues I could see really is the runtime. 151 minutes is quite excessive.
Yeah, it is. It is a bit long.
But then again, so was the first film. That one was like 140 minutes or something.
Yeah,
Quite a bit, but
I think you do start to feel it a bit. Like,
yeah, I think the
You do
first half
feel
is
it a
still
little bit.
quite slow. It's the second half that really picks up. But I mean, otherwise, I don't really have any major issues. At the same time, I can totally see why someone wouldn't care for these films. That's fine. But
I haven't honestly met anybody who doesn't like these films.
no,
I can literally say that I've honestly never ever met somebody who's like, oh yeah, I don't really think much of Pirates of the Caribbean.
but I think as well, like going back to the fact that yeah, Disney made this film, they wouldn't now, even with the fifth film, and it was just like.
Nah.
Like the fact that even the directors were like, we went back to the first film to look for like references, and I'm like, you don't need to, just do a different film. Surprisingly easy, especially if you use like the Star Wars logic. And as I say, I mean, like we referenced Empire Strikes Back a couple of times before as like a positive. It's a good idea, especially when you're going to be doing. Like part 2 and part 3, you can afford to do something like that.
Yeah, you can actually afford to be different compared to your original, which is what you want. Like, it's pointless trying to make the sequel just like the original, because then it's just going to fall into the whole Transformers trap where every film is just the same.
Mm-hmm. Will we ever talk about the Transformers films on this?
God, I hope not.
Are they classed as horror films?
Yeah, they're definitely horrible to watch. I wouldn't class
Excellent,
them as
then we're
horror
going to be
film,
covering them on Graveyard Chit Chat at some point in 2024. Please, no. I'd rather just rewatch them and just leave it at that. But no, I'm happy that my thoughts on it are still, they're a little bit less than they used to be, but overall, I still really
I think
like this
the
one.
thing is, though, when we do stuff like this, is like when we haven't. I mean, we mentioned that, like, it's years since we rewatched it. You always go in thinking, like, I'm quite scared because I don't know how I'm honestly going to feel about this film.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, at one point in my life, I'm like, oh, yeah, I absolutely love this film. But then rewatch it, I'm like, oh, it's not as good as I remember.
Yeah.
So you always go in with a little bit of anxiety, like, oh, God. But I'm definitely glad that, yeah, there's nitpicky things with the film. And I mean nitpicky. Like, I mean, runtime being one of them, but that's literally about it, to be honest.
Otherwise,
Can't really say much else.
Yeah, otherwise it's pretty spot on, to say the least, and I'm just happy that it's actually that. And as I said before, when I rewatched At World's End recently, because we've had this much of a break, I was like, nah, screw it, I'll just watch At World's End as well, over like 3 days, if I'm honest. Because there's a lot.
Why is it taking you 3 days to watch?
Well, to be honest,
Watch World's End.
I liked it a bit more than I remembered, but we'll get into that a little bit more when we do cover it. I think that is like towards the end of September. I think I've got it labelled in for. But yeah, I'm just happy that I still like this film, because I'd be quite annoyed if we were still talking about it and I was like, no, I hate it. It's terrible.
I don't think there was any doubt that I was going to, like, absolutely detest the film, but I kind of knew that I would maybe not like it as much. I mean, I'm nowhere like, oh yeah, it's not that good, but I'm like, yeah, there's definitely a couple of little things, but it doesn't affect my overall viewing experience of it, I'd say. I viewed it. I'm like, oh yeah, you know what it is. It still holds up really well.
Yeah, for sure. And it's been nice to talk about again. And of course, it's just been nice to talk in general, because it has been way too long. It's been about as long as it was waiting for my internet to fix itself.
Yeah.
We don't talk about that. Well, I do. Constantly. It's a funny thing to talk about. But yes, that has been our thoughts on Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. So thank you very much for listening. Next week, we are returning to the Halo franchise with Halo Reach from 2010. I'm saying 2010 as if like the year as a company. It's not. But it is Bungie's last game in the series. And I think it's safe to say reactions are quite all over the place in a way I didn't actually remember. So it's going to be interesting to talk about. Dan.
It is. It's a Dan.
But yes, that will be at the beginning of September. I am curious though, Dan, because I know I asked this on the last episode of The Real Podcasters, in particular with what we were going to be discussing on one chit-chat in the graveyard.
Chit-chat in the graveyard.
Because much like with this podcast, there was quite a bit that changed there as well, wasn't there?
Yeah. Put it this way, just before, well, we recorded an episode and then Audacity just wasn't playing ball. I was like, you know what it is? I need a break.
Yeah.
So then I readjusted the schedule, we'll say, and it is completely and utterly revamped now. But the difference is Regan is going to be kept absolutely out of it, so he cannot see what is coming on the next episode. So he has no idea.
You're only doing that though because you just love how fidgety and nervous I get at the very end of every episode. Like next week, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it's gonna be.
Yeah, you just sort of like sat there biting your nails, like.
So, I haven't got any nails left, Dan. They're gone.
Yeah, it's just like your it's just half your finger
I'm
left.
chewing the fingers now instead.
It's using like the skeletal finger as a toothpick at this point. No, on Graveyard Chit Chat, we are returning to the slasher genre with a film from 1980.
Saturday the 7th.
Saturday the 7th. No, we are talking about the very first Friday the 13th film by Sean S. Cunningham.
Gotta love that I still message you to be like, okay, is this actually the first one or the first one with like Jason and the mask? Because I just don't know. I wouldn't be shocked if you're like, no, we're going to start with part 2 for some reason.
Yeah, it's just, imagine it's just like a really mixed timeline. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to start with part 8. And we're going to do the even number quadrilogy here. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do part 8 and then 2, 4, 6. No, we're talking about Friday the 13th, the original. Yeah,
I'll be watching that at some point during the week. But as I say, thank you very much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed us. If you listen to this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you listen on Spotify, you can follow us on there. Again, all our social medias in the description. Be sure to check out those, follow them, subscribe, or whatever, so you get to keep up to date with all new episodes of The Real Podcasters. Thank you very much for listening. I do hope you enjoy it. And until next week, it's goodbye from Dan.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. Goodbye.